Okay, let's dive right in. We're going to break down that simple little button you see on your phone every single day. You know the one I'm talking about, Allow. It seems harmless, right? But behind that one tap, well, there's a huge invisible battle being fought for your data.
So what's actually going on there? We're going to peel back the layers on that single tap. We'll look at everything from the little piece of code that makes that pop-up appear, all the way to its massive, staggering impact on the global digital economy. It's a journey that shows you just how much power is packed into one tiny choice.
All right, so you download a new app, you open it up for the first time, and boom, there it is, that pop-up. It looks so simple, but what you're really looking at is the front door to what some researchers call a sophisticated architecture of control, a whole system designed to manage access to your most personal information.
But to really get what's happening today, we've got to rewind a bit and look at how things used to be. You know, back in the early days of smartphones, it wasn't a friendly pop-up. It was a blunt, all-or-nothing decision you had to make right when you installed the app. And that old system, it led to this thing called permission fatigue. An app would just throw this huge list of permissions at you all at once before you even got to use it. And faced with that wall of text, what did most of us do? Yep, we just started clicking accept without even reading, which turned these really important security warnings into, well, just meaningless noise.
So to fight this fatigue, the operating systems themselves had to get smarter. They started sorting permissions based on risk. You've got your normal permissions for low-risk stuff, like letting an app access the internet. Those get granted automatically, but then you have the dangerous ones. We're talking your location, your camera, your contacts, and for those, the system now requires your explicit, in-the-moment, okay.
This whole problem of permission fatigue and frankly data exploitation got so big that one of the major players in the game decided to just change the rules completely. They essentially started building a digital fortress around your data.
And you can really see how things escalated here. I mean, it started kind of small back in 2017 with updates to the Safari browser to limit web cookies. But by 2021, with App Tracking Transparency, or ATT, it turned into a full-scale crackdown. Suddenly, every app had to ask that now famous question: allow this app to track your activity across other companies' apps and websites.
And the impact? Wow. It was immediate and it was absolutely massive. When people were given a clear, simple choice, an overwhelming 95% of users in the US said nope, they chose not to be tracked. It was this huge signal that when people actually understand the choice they're making, they really do value their privacy. So, problem solved, right? A clear choice, users made their preference known, story's over. Well, not so fast. The story actually gets a lot more complicated and way more interesting when you start to look at the psychology behind that little tap.
You see, research uncovered this fascinating little quirk in how our brains make decisions. It turns out, just providing a reason, pretty much any reason at all, for why you need data makes a huge difference in whether we say yes. And the numbers are pretty striking. Take a look. In one study, when a permission request had zero explanation, it got approved about 66% of the time. But when the developers just added a short little sentence explaining why they needed the data, that approval rate jumped up to almost 74%. That is a significant leap.
But here's the truly bizarre part. The quality, or even the logic of the explanation, didn't really matter that much. It's kind of like this classic psychology experiment where someone asking to cut in line for a photocopier had just as much success saying, because I have to make copies, as they did when they gave a really good reason. Our brains are often just looking for the shape of a justification, not necessarily the substance.
So you'd think every app developer would be using this simple trick, right? But here's the twist. An analysis of thousands of apps showed that a staggering 81% of them don't. And when developers were asked why, the main reason was pretty simple. A lot of them just didn't know the feature existed, or they had no idea how powerful it was.
Okay, so now let's zoom all the way out. Let's connect your personal choice, that one little tap, to these massive, industry-shaking consequences. Because that single decision has a powerful, powerful ripple effect.
So what happens when 95% of people opt out of tracking? Well, the entire multi-billion-dollar digital advertising industry is basically forced to rebuild itself from the ground up. This one change caused a huge shift toward what's called first-party data. That's information you give a company willingly. It fueled the rise of contextual advertising, where ads relate to what you're looking at, not your personal history. It even pushed other tech giants and governments to get much more serious about privacy.
So when you boil it all down, this whole battle, it isn't really just about technology or code or corporate policies. At its core, it's about psychology. Understanding how the design of these choices can nudge our behavior is every bit as important as the code that makes them run. And that leaves us with a pretty big question for the future. We've just lived through the great battle for tracking permissions. But the next wave of technology is already here, on-device artificial intelligence, and you can bet it's going to start asking for a whole new set of permissions. So what will that battle look like?